So today, somebody asked for the topic, what to do when a loved one has passed away. So this is indeed a very relevant topic for our lives, isn't it? We have many loved ones, or at least one or some, isn't it? And once born, the one sure thing that is to happen is death, isn't it? Everything else in life is pretty uncertain. But once born, we know that we're definitely going to die. But the other interesting thing is that we don't know when that is going to happen. So when we talk about what to do when somebody we love passed away, there are two aspects, or maybe more, but at least it's about yourself and also the person who has passed away. So I want to start by relating to you something from my own life. Some of you may have heard me say this story, but it's actually always very helpful. Something that I learned from my father. Something that has been incredibly helpful for me in my life. And this was when I was about 13 years of age, still quite a young girl. One of my father's cousins passed away, and they were in another city. At this time, my mom was away. So it was just me and my father. So we drove to this other city to attend the funeral. It was quite a sad funeral house. So many people were crying, mourning, grieving, saying, we can't live without this person. Please don't leave. We want to have you back. In this kind of way, people were really crying and was finding it really hard to deal with the death of this loved person. So after the funeral, we were coming back. On our way back, my father was saying, for us, we have lost this one person. But for the person who died, it's as if all of us have died on him or her. Isn't that true? When the separation happens, it's to be seen from both sides. So how hard is that for the person who died, isn't it? So for us, either we lost our father or brother or son or daughter or one person. But for them, they lost their spouse, their children, their siblings, their friends, all of those things in one go. So this is something that we need to sometimes consider about the other person. At the same time, are you ready to die as well, isn't it? Sometimes people very easily say, oh, I'm ready to die, but I'm not ready for my loved ones to die yet. But the truth is, when we die at that time, it's as if all of our loved ones also die at the same time. So this is where we need to start preparing for both our death and the death of our loved ones way ahead in our spiritual journey. It's extremely helpful, and it is a beneficial way to guide ourselves as well, because it has many benefits, as I will relate to you during this talk. So when my father said like that, I sort of had a shock. Yes, I never thought about that. I never thought about the other person. We always think about us, my loss. And like I was mentioning during the last talk about attachment, attachment is precisely that, right? What happiness they give me, their part in my life, and why I can't live without them because they were making me happy or fulfilling something in my life. And now when they're gone, it's difficult for me. But this is the wrong way to look at things, isn't it? So then there is so much suffering ahead of us. So that is why preparation ahead of time is very important. But anyway, what my father said was that he said, if at some time when he dies, he said it will be very, very difficult to see me crying because we were really attached. I was really attached to my father at that time. I really loved him. I was the only child and he loved me as well. And so it was he said it will be very, very hard. He said it'll be painful enough to be dead from everybody. And he said it will be even more painful to see if you are crying and asking me to come back. I won't be able to come back, even though I would want to come back. So he said, will you promise me that you would not cry when I die? So put it in that way. Is it possible not to give this promise? I just could not do that because, I realized like when he dies, when he can't come back, at least I want him to be happy, or at least not too sad, right? So then as a 13-year-old girl, I gave my promise to my dad saying, yes, I will not cry when you die. And of course, I was thinking, well, I'm only 13. Usually people die. Your parents die when they're really old, when you are really old. But little did I know he only had another 7 days left. Exactly the following Sunday. He had 3 heart attacks in a row and he passed away. Just like that. Yeah. And my promise to my father was fresh in my mind still. It was really hard, it's not easy. Especially at that time, I didn't know much Dhamma, even though I was a born Buddhist. Right. So, and I didn't have anybody else to ask. My mother was away abroad. So it was very hard for her as well. And it took her a couple of days to come back. And during that time, I had my aunties and uncles who were crying like anything. So I couldn't get any help from them. So I also have I have to say something here, even though I tried and managed successfully to not cry, it was not suppression. I did it with wisdom. Yeah, I actually reflected what my father said. I reflected there is no point into crying. No matter how much I'm going to cry, he's not going to come back. All that is going to do is make him very sad, give myself too much trouble and pain. So this is of no use. So I thought like that. I remembered his words, and that's what gave me strength. But of course, it is really hard. It is really hard to keep my mind in the middle. Gently, gently, it slowly goes back and say, oh, I want my father. I can't live without him. When such kind of thinking starts to happen, I can see the tears welling up and they're going to come out. And then I gently bring my mind back to the center. It's really hard to keep it there. It's nice to move again. Maybe out of desperation, at one point, I started to think about the good qualities of my father. He was a really, really nice person. He was a very generous person. And it was also helpful at the time because I was in Sri Lanka, and in Sri Lanka, the dead bodies are actually brought to home, not really funeral parlors, at least when I was a little kid. So lots of people were coming to my home to see my father's dead body. And many people that I didn't know even would come and say stories about my father or what he had done. So that gave me strength as well. So as I was thinking about the good qualities of my father, instead of sadness, joy started to come up in my mind. And I felt that this was really helpful. Yeah. So when I think about good things that he had done, when I am happy, when I'm not sad, I think if his spirit was around, he would also sink into those things. He will also remember the good things he has done. Yeah. And as he rejoices in his own good actions from his life, it is helpful to uplift his mind. Also, when he sees that I'm dealing well with his death, that gives him strength to also deal with his separation. I'm just telling you this story, which is actually a real story, to say that these things are possible. Probably it is easy to say than do in certain occasions, but it certainly can be done. And it is powerful as well, because what happens is if you cry and hold on to the person who passed away, it makes it very difficult for that spirit there, the person who passed away, to move on into the next life or into the next, place. Because that attachment, that bond keeps you there. And anybody who had stayed with somebody who was dying next to their deathbed, you would know and you would hear stories that they always pass away when you have just left the room, maybe to go to the toilet or to go and grab a cup of tea, or when you've just gone out. Sometimes the whole family is there together and then they all decide to go out and have something to eat or something. And that is the time the person passes away. And that is because while everybody is around, the attachment is so strong that they continue, they hang on. Yeah. So this is really important at the time of death and soon after death, to really communicate with your mind to the person and ask and encourage them, to say to them that you will be okay, that you will look after each other, and ask the person to move on. Yeah, this is important because especially the loved ones, if they have been a place of a guardian or a parent or a carer for you, they always worry, are you going to be okay without them? So it is important to have this kind of conversation. If you're lucky enough to be with your loved one just before they pass away, or even many years before, so you can always have these conversations, saying and assuring them that you will be able to be okay, you look after yourself, and all of those things. It's really important, this kind of preparation, this kind of conversation. Even though it may be difficult, if it is at all possible to have, it is important to have these things. So if you didn't get to say that, then after having passed away, when the person have passed away, even in your mind, you can really let them know that you're going to be okay. And another very important thing that needs to be done, especially before they pass away, but of course, if you didn't get the chance, because sometimes death happens so suddenly and you didn't get a chance, is to ask for forgiveness. It's really, really important, because we don't know in our long or short life that we have spent time together, the things which we have done or things that we have not done may have been hurtful or harmful, or something may have been there. We just don't know. Yeah. So of course it is always better to do this while we are living. In fact, straight away, if you feel you've done something, or in a very regular basis, yeah, to ask for forgiveness. As monastics, whenever we depart the monastery for more than 3 days, we always ask for forgiveness from each other, because we don't know whether we'll get a chance to return, whether our death may happen. So it's very, very important with loved ones to ask for forgiveness and be forgiven, and also to forgive. This is an important process. And during many of the Dhamma talks, I have mentioned about how do you forgive yourself and others. It's always through understanding the process of conditionality, yeah, how we are doing things because we have been conditioned by the past, yeah, and sometimes our mindfulness is low. So those are the times we have done these things. It is always important to forgive. When you ask Ajahn Brahm, he always say, how many times do you have to forgive someone? He says, always one more time, always one more time. Yeah. So it is really important to understand this, but it is also important to do, ask for forgiveness from the person who's passed away. So that's another thing. And then remembering, if you happen to be at their deathbed while they're passing away, and if they're in a good state to be able to have a conversation, you can always mention the many or even one good thing they have done that has been useful. If they've done many good things, you can mention about those as well, as a way of uplifting. But of course, if they are in pain, if they are tired, don't exhaust them. That's also important. So you have to understand and pay attention to know when is the right time and what is the right thing to do. But never mind, even after they have passed away, you can still, have a conversation in your mind. They might understand, because once you pass away, it's mind-to-mind conversations. Even though you may not hear, may not see them, they might hear and see you. So you can still remember and recall and recollect the good things they have done. And as they become happy with those things, that is a great support for them to move on into something better or nicer. It is in the same token that the Buddha also mentioned about sharing merits. So this is quite common in the Buddhist world, that we share merits with the person who has passed away. And in Sri Lanka, we do it after 7 days. In some of the Chinese traditions, they do it at 49 days. There are so many different things. It doesn't matter, I suppose, the number of days, but sometime closer to passing away, while they may still be around, because many people may not move away straight away. They might have a little bit of attachment, a little bit of concern, or sometimes they don't even know that they're dead. It takes a while for people to understand that they're dead. So you have to sometimes be sensitive to that, but whatever it is. And how does this passing of merit happens? Yeah, many people do this. They come and they pour water, they offer some nice meal sometimes at a monastery or something like this, to have some good merit, and then they pass on this good merit to the loved ones. So is it like a bank account that you have and you transfer it from yours to theirs? Do you know how much you give? It's interesting, isn't it? How does this happen? It is interesting to understand, how does this happen? So it is like this. So if it is your birthday, let's say, if it is your birthday, somebody who loves you, who cares about you, and comes and tells you, well, as your birthday gift, I did this, that thing that you really like. Maybe you like to support a certain thing, and they may have given a donation to them or done something that you like to do that makes you happy. They said, I did this for you to celebrate your birthday. If they say that like that, how do you feel? You feel instantly very happy, isn't it? You feel so happy. Wow, my friend, my loved one did something so nice for me. Wow, that's so nice. And you become so happy about it. So it's in the same way, like when somebody has passed away, you can also do something that they like, that they enjoy, they appreciate, and they can rejoice in. And then you tell them that you are doing this for them. So when you do that, if they are in that spirit world, there's only one realm in which people can um, rejoice and take that merit, and that merit is that rejoicing, that joy that comes. That is the merit. Yeah, so that is how the merit gets passed on. But they need to be able to understand what you have done, and it has to be something that they enjoy, right? You can't do something that they don't support, they don't like. Let's say when they're living, they hated a certain thing, right? They may not have liked or appreciated a certain thing. But then when they pass away, you can't go and do something there and say, I did this for your merit because it's probably higher merit. I mean, occasionally there are people who are not that keen to come to the monasteries or support monastics. And especially if your loved one was not a Buddhist, they would not make much sense to them to go to the monastery and offer something. Even though merit may be higher, we don't know, it could be. But if they liked, to support orphan dogs, for example, or orphan children, then do something like that, and then they will be very happy, and then you can say that's what you did for them, and then they can rejoice in that, if that makes sense. So it has to be like that. So do something, don't do things that makes them upset, especially while they're around, just because you think that it is good. This is not the right thing to do. This is really important as well. So also, if you care about your loved ones while they're living, find out as well. Yeah, this is important thing to do as well while they're living. How would like to do? What would you like me to do? And what would make you happy? Yeah, finding out it beforehand is already good. So this is the sharing of merits. This is the best thing that we can do after they pass away. But most of the time, what we need to do is while we are living, do the right thing. This is the most important thing. While there's very little we can do after people pass away. Because like I said, like the Buddha said, they have to be only in one kind of realm, and that is a hungry ghost kind of realm, a spirit world. It is only in that realm that they can reap the merits that you give. If they're in any other realm, it is not possible for them to rejoice, to understand. They're too far away and they don't understand. So they can't get the merit. But again, the Buddha says, never mind, the person, your loved one who passed away may not be in that realm. But the amount of time that you have traveled in this samsara, you have had many mothers, many fathers, many husbands, many wives, many children, many brothers, many sisters, many aunties, and many uncles. So many relatives you've had in the past. And it is likely some of them may still be in that realm, stuck. And even though you don't know them, you can't see them, you can't remember them, they know you. They can remember you. They will remember 10 lifetimes ago, she was my daughter, he was my son, he was my husband or my brother. They remember. So that is why whenever we are sharing merits, we also share merits with our relatives from previous lives. So when they hear that, they say, oh, I am one of her relatives or his relatives from a previous life, and they are inviting me to share their merit. Wow, that's great. And then they become happy. So that's why the Buddha said, never mind. Even the chances may be little that your particular loved one is in that particular realm to be able to reap the merit you are giving. There will be others who can rejoice. And it is always good to do good things. So this is what we normally do at the time after people pass away. And so again, to remind, so it is important when somebody has passed away to let them go in your mind, and you can tell them as well. And to be prepared for the death beforehand. So this is why, otherwise it is really hard to do if you leave it to the last minute. Your attachments will be too strong to be able to let them go. So we have to start working beforehand, even if it is really hard. It is important, because whether you like it or not, this is coming, isn't it? So therefore, this is important. So asking them to let go and to move on, reminding them of their own good actions, asking for forgiveness, and then sharing merits with them. These are some of the things that we can do around death. And this is about things that we can do for the person. But what about us? Yeah, so we have to take care of us. Sometimes immediately after death, we are quite okay because we have adrenaline rush to try to organize the funeral, to go through that whole process and everything, and everybody's around and you're so busy, so you sort of keep going. But sometimes things come to you and you get hit by sadness and difficulty a little after, maybe a week or two later. When things calm down, these things can come back. And that is where sometimes grief starts to come up. And this can be quite dangerous. Yeah, this can be actually very dangerous for you and for the person who passed away as well. Because once you start to really grieve, yeah, really, really become very sad whole day for many days. And sometimes some very unskillful people grieve for not just months, but for years, for decades. And that's extremely, extremely harmful for the person and for their people around and for the person who's passed away. You know, that keeps those people around. Now, if you have listened or watched to near-death experience stories, yeah, there are many, many people who meet their parents or their spouse or their children who'd pass away. They're still waiting in that spirit realm. They're still there. And when you pass away, you meet them. There are many, many stories. And one of the stories that comes to mind in one of those near-death experience stories is there was this man in South Africa, and he was really, really unwell. And he was in the intensive care unit for many, many days. So there was this nurse who was looking after him. And of course, you know, after a while, even though he was in his almost dying, they fell in love. So the nurse and this person who was nearly dying. This happens, right? This happens. You just don't know when you're going to fall in love. Anyway, so it came the weekend, and the nurse said, well, I won't be here this weekend. It's my birthday. So I'm going home to another city. So, and during that weekend, this man dies. So when he died, he met this nurse. He didn't know at the time what was happening. Of course, it was a near-death experience. He comes back, and when he wakes up again, he had like a shock, and he didn't know what happened. And he remembered meeting this nurse who he really loved. And she was there, and she told him, it's not your time yet, go back. And she also said, when you go back, also please tell my parents that she really, really, really loved them, and she's really, really sorry that she ruined the brand new car. So what has happened was during her birthday, her parents have bought her a really nice, fast car, and she has taken it for a drive, and she had a fatal car accident and died on the same weekend. So they have both died, but the man had come back because he only had a near-death experience, but the nurse has really died. So because it was just new, she still met him, but that's just one story. But there are many other stories. So he didn't even know she was dead. Yeah. So this is how real the spirit world is. It is there, and many other people have so many stories about meeting their parents because they're still waiting. So this is really important to let them go in your mind, and asking them to move on is really, really important. Yeah. So that's one of the things. So once we grieve too long, is also very, very detrimental. So how do you stop that? How do you catch yourself? Yeah, this is where it is important. So especially these times that are after, you know, the death of a loved one, you need to take care of yourself. Don't get too busy as a way of, you know, escaping. When you get too busy, when you get too tired, then before you know it, your mind starts to go into grief. So it is really important at a time that you take some rest. Take care of your own well-being. So eat well, rest well, and take care of yourself. And then do some things that makes you happy. Bring up some joy. And you can also use that to share the merits, right? You can do whatever good things you do. A little bit of meditation, help out with somebody else, do good acts, deeds, And this uplifts your own mind and gives your mind some strength. And then you can also always share that merit with the other person. The reason is when you have joy, when you're not so tired, then you can catch yourself. So like I said, when I was a little girl, when my father passed away, I showed the technique that I always talk about, yeah? Manasikara Sambhava Sabbe Dhamma is a term, a saying in Pali, and that is all of the Dhammas, that are all the mind objects or the mind states, arise from the way you give attention. So in this occasion, we are talking about sadness. When the sadness comes about, there is a way that you think about a thing. So when you think about in a way that brings sadness, I can't live without them, I want them back, they shouldn't have died, I really want to be with them. When you think like that, sadness just comes in. But instead, if you think, oh, how wonderful it is to have somebody like that. You know, they did good things. I'm so lucky to be their daughter or their son or their whatever. And any good things about this person, celebrating their life, remembering their good actions. When you direct your mind like that, sadness doesn't come. Instead, some form of joy comes in. And this is helpful. So remember, this is possible to do. However, why it is difficult is when you are tired, when your mind doesn't have enough energy. So that is why I mentioned taking care of yourself is very important when somebody you love has passed away. Yeah, so this is really important. And then you can do, instead of allowing, catch yourself. It is okay to cry. Yeah, it is okay to be sad from time to time. It is unavoidable. But what I'm saying is don't allow it to make a big habit. Once it gets into a big momentum, you almost start indulging in it. It is actually the word. It becomes a form of indulgence. It is actually also a chemical addiction. Yeah, because when you're sad, there are certain neurotransmitters that come into your body. And it's also sort of becomes an addiction. And that is why some people can't let go of their grief. Ajahn Brahm tells a story about he was at a grief conference. Yeah, he was giving a keynote speech. And at the end of that, one woman came and really scolded him. How dare you take away my grief? And this lady has been grieving. Her son has been a victim of one of those murder cases, a very famous one, which I can't remember which one. But and she even became quite famous in the newspapers because she was the mother of this man who died, and she really held on to that grief for decades. Yeah, so this is how grief goes. It's really important that you take care of yourself, because once you start grieving, your other family members, your other loved ones who are still alive also start to struggle. Yeah, and this happens. Yeah. So this happens and it becomes very difficult for your children. It is not so easy to live for a long time with somebody who is completely sad, down, and depressed. Yeah. It is not helpful for yourself and it is not helpful for your rest of the family. So it has many, many bad consequences and no use either. And another interesting thing to reflect is, do these very indigenous communities, do they also have this kind of lot of grief? I really am not sure whether it's true. I think they deal with these things much better. I think they understand. I mean, sadness would come. A separation from a loved one brings suffering. This is first noble truth. Yeah. So this is real. This is true. Sadness will come. But grief in the sense, being sad for a long, long period of time, holding on to it, I doubt it. Because I also hear once again, also from Ajahn Brahm, he says when he was a young monk in Thailand, in northeast Thailand, in the villages, when death happens, he never really saw people really sad and crying in the same way they do in the West or in the other, like, developed places. In Buddhist countries especially, they had a good understanding about death and rebirth and how to deal with these things. But I feel very many indigenous people also have an understanding, because in the ancient times, or in this kind of very early years where there was no medicine, no medical facilities, even when a woman got pregnant, the husband and their parents would know, if all goes well, the woman and the child would survive. But there was very high chances that mother or baby or both might die, because this was quite common, childbirth and infections and stuff. When there was not much hygiene and techniques, this was quite a common thing. And when your husband goes hunting, you never know whether he will come back, because it's dangerous, it's scary in the wild. So, death and birth and all those, this grief is, I think, a very culturally ingrained thing. It's an idea. People expect you to be sad. How can you not be sad? How can you not be grieving or mourning when you lost somebody? So also we feel like the pressure to be, doing that. And I hear this sometimes. Some people don't feel that sad because they have a good understanding about death. And also, especially if somebody who's lived a good life, a good person has died, certainly there's no need to worry about, because they will die and be born in a good place. But the thing is, sometimes it's the other people giving them pressure. Oh, you must be sad, you must be grieving, and they expect, then you feel that pressure also. And this is the real sad thing. This is real difficult. But, you can be still strong and do the right thing and even educate these other people about it and how harmful it is to oneself and the person who passed away. If you really love them, if you really care about them, then not becoming too sad and grieve is the right thing to do. Yeah. So these are really interesting things to think about and deal with and learn from and about death, I suppose. So
Ayya, might I say something about there's a psychiatric diagnosis which is called prolonged grief disorder.
okay.
And it's suffered by about 10% of people,
Yeah.
where the grief process doesn't resolve, but there
Right.
are very specialist counseling techniques that
Right.
can be used. And it seems to be most prevalent where there's been a very traumatic death or the death of a child.
Right.
And I've met people with this diagnosis, and it defies belief, because you sort of think they know it's ruining their life, but they don't have the skills to move beyond.
Right.
So if we come across people like that, there is help available, but it's often not just within family and friends.
Right.
It's kind of where there's a bug in the software, if you like. There's a bug in the brain and the thinking, and
Yes.
it needs somebody with some very special skills. But people can get through it
Yes.
if they want to. As you said, it's
Yes.
some people take on grief as an identity,
Yes.
and that's their choice.
Yes. Thank you so much, Nicola, for sharing that. It is a very important information and important point, because, of course, each individual and what they can do and our own mental health and well-being and where we are at also plays a part. So, and it is good to know that there is professional help available. And if you want, you can do it. Buddhism and all this Dhamma path is always, it's a DIY, right? Do it yourself, and you can only do it if you want to. No matter how much other people want, it won't happen. You need to want it, and then you can actually do it. Thank you for sharing that.
Hi, thank you so much. That was very helpful. But my question is about the death to rebirth timeline. So it sounds like there's varying lengths of time. How does that work between and rebirth? Yeah.
Yes, it is different. Yeah, it is different between individuals and their mental development and their attachments. It's multiple things affecting, but there is certainly in a period. It's not, death is not an instant thing. It's not in 1 second you died and next second you're born. Not at all. The death itself is a slow process of going away, and that's why near-death is. Near-death experiences are there. So there's still that this body is still there, even though it's clinically dead, and they moved on to another realm and they've come back again even. And sometimes it lasts a couple of minutes, but sometimes before they get to born, once they've completely left here, still the process of getting into another one is not so instant. Depends again on how attached you are and where you're going, which kind of destination, all of these things. So it's very hard. I don't think anybody would know. Not anybody would know. There are people who would know, and that is if there is somebody who has divine eye, Dibba Chakra. It's a psychic ability that people, deep meditators, can develop. And if somebody is a skilled meditator who's developed this psychic ability of divine eye, they can see. They can see the stream of consciousness. In Buddhism, we don't call a soul. What we have is a stream of consciousness, and they see the stream of consciousness departing from one place and entering another. It's interesting. They say it's like leaving one house and entering another house. They see. That's how they talk about the process. And again, another Ajahn Brahm story. He said that there was a monk a long time ago in Thailand who had this ability. And in that monastery, there was a monkey, a pet monkey. All the monks were very, very familiar and were playful. And this monkey was also very respectful and was really taking part in the monastery as a community member. And one day, the monkey gets very excited and very playful. But one day he has an accident. He got too excited running and greeting the cars that come and get run over and dies. But this monk who has this psychic ability sees this monkey's stream of consciousness departing, and he also sees where it got re-entered. And there was a pregnant lady, and he made a mistake. He shouldn't have said this, but he didn't think twice, so it just came out of his mouth, and he said that. So of course, everybody in the village knew what the baby was, who the baby was. But the interesting thing was, apparently this baby was extra hairy. And also quite like very, playful and stuff like that. But anyway, but this was just the story from here. But in the suttas, if you want to look up in the Kamma Vibhanga Sutta, the Buddha talks about this, and with Dibba Chakra, But again, it's really hard. It could be entering the spirit world, and it could be entering the next one. It takes time. Yeah, it takes time. So it is hard to know.
But when I grew up, when somebody died, especially at home, you sort of, even if you call the doctor, know that, but you don't move the body for a little while, not be in a hurry to kind of get rid of it all as we are.
Yeah, 24 hours sometimes they keep.
That's right.
But also, very often 7 days is there in many cultures, even in Buddhism. 7 days seems to be the magic number. We don't know why, but sort of they think that around about that long they might hang around, and after that they technically pass away. But it is quite common that straight away for some time the person doesn't even know that they're dead. Actually, it takes quite a while for them to realize that they have died. Yeah, it takes a while. And this is also true from near-death experiences. They don't realize that they have died. It takes a while. But I don't know whether it doesn't seem appropriate to tell this. This is again another kind of almost like a joke. It's not a joke, but it's actually a real story, but it sounds funny. Please forgive me for saying this, but it just comes up because of the question.
Yeah.
So one day when Ajahn Brahm has done a funeral in Perth, in Karakata or somewhere, and he was with the funeral director, a lady who has been a funeral director for about like 30 years, so quite a older lady who's been there, done many, many funerals. So while he was walking with her, he just asked, so have you seen any ghosts? Yeah, because being a funeral director and dealing with death all the time, if anybody, she would be somebody who had seen ghosts. So she said, of course, I see them all the time. So he said, okay, tell me stories. Where do you see them? How do you see them? He said, sometimes I had to work late in my office. And sometimes, in the other side is all the where the dead bodies are, the freezers and stuff. So she's sometimes working away, and through the window, through the door, she sees some people walking. It's actually the dead person, and they're walking, and then he asks. So when she sees them, what do you do? He said, "Get back to your box," he said. She has no time to mess around. So she says, "You, hey, get back in your box. What are you doing?" I don't know. This is what Ajahn Brahm said, but it is quite common that they will be around, and they probably don't know they're dead quite a while. And another interesting thing is that we are scared of cemeteries, right? We are scared that ghosts might be there, but it is very unlikely that they're there. They are probably hanging around you, the loved ones, or if they were in like a nursing home or where they used to stay, or their house or the hospital, is much more likely. And probably hospitals have more ghosts than cemeteries. Cemeteries probably very, very quiet. In fact, cemeteries are very peaceful. Have you noticed? Cemeteries are very peaceful places. I don't think there are any ghosts there. It is anything, they are not there because they're just wanting to be with their people if they're around. But timeline is hard to tell. Yeah.
Venerable, thank you so much for that talk. I just found it quite interesting that when you pass away, that you your stream of consciousness kind of retains that memory of who they're attached to in that intermediate realm, but then I guess they sort of, that memory fades away when they are born in a new life, and they, can't at least access it consciously. Is there any reason why that happens, or has the Buddha said anything about that?
The thing is, we have access to it, right? It's there. It's like echoes. It's there. That's why another psychic ability that you can develop from deep meditation is called Pubbe Nivasa Anusati Jnana. And that is recollecting your many past lives. So all of those, not just one, not just two, not just 100, not 1,000, many thousands, many millions of them. The Buddha recollected past lives from 91 eons. Yeah. So all of that is there to be accessed with psychic ability. But there are people, there are little kids who remember their past lives very accurately. Yeah. And also when you do past life regression with hypnosis, yeah, then you can access your past lives as well, many. So it is there available. And the thing is, when you die, especially, the memory is very, very clear. This is very interesting. This is another whole Dhamma talk itself, but I will just keep it short. But what near-death experience people say is their memory become very, very clear, especially of this one life. Yeah, during that 1 or 2 minutes that they were clinically dead, they remember everything that they have done, said, and thought about during their life, all the intentional actions by body, speech, and mind, from the time they were born up until they passed away. At least that whole life review happens. For certain people, they even go back into previous lives as well. During that process, they remember, because it is accessible depending on who you are for some people. So certainly they remember and they know. And also in those other realms, they can remember. That's why your previous people will still know you and remember you and can be even still attached to you. Yeah. So this is interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
And many people ask, what is the right thing to do if you are at the deathbed, at a, somebody who's dying a couple of days before, or just a few hours or a few minutes before, if you happen to be. There is no one answer. We have to be quite sensitive and see where they're at. It's a very interesting time. Even if it was somebody who has dementia and completely, even somebody who was unconscious or was in a coma, the thing that they say is that at the real time of death, just before that, their mind becomes clear, because the mind gets released from the brain, because all of that dementia and all of that is because of the brain chemistry. But when the mind is released from the brain, they have clarity, they become normal, they remember everything, they hear everything. So, and we don't know when that is happening to them. They could not be able to talk, they might be silent, they might be, we don't know. So it is really important at a time, if you need to try, and we can only do our best, right? We also don't know, is to become a bit sensitive, maybe become a bit peaceful around there. That can never go wrong if you become peaceful. And if you become peaceful and quiet, and if you listen, you might get to hear and understand what may be the appropriate thing. So the appropriate thing may be being peaceful and being silent. The appropriate thing may be to wish them well, gladness, remember good things, bring up joy. Your own joy might resonate with them. Joy from something good. It really depends. If they're distressed and worried, just holding their hands, stroking them gently, all of those things. I mean, it's really, really hard to tell. And I am no expert, because I actually have, up till now, not been with somebody dying. Yeah, I have not had that experience yet myself. These are coming from what I have heard. But it is really, there's no one way to do things. So you just have to be sensitive and do, but certainly don't disturb them too much. Like, try to do something that they're not used to. Like, so in some cultures, they try to whisper to their ear Dhamma, they try to put Dhamma talks, they try to put chanting, all kinds of things. But if that was not somebody who liked those things, there's no point in doing them. They might get even angry at it. So that is why sometimes it's good to ask the question from the person, if this happens to you, what would you like me to do? Yeah.
Excuse me, Ayya.
Yes.
This is Rumi.
Yes, you can ask Rumi.
Yes. It's actually to share my experience when you said you
Yeah.
haven't been with people who are dying.
Yes.
I had like both my parents passed away, and
Yeah.
I was present at their deathbed with both of them.
Yeah.
It's a very, very powerful experience. My mother had end-stage dementia. She couldn't swallow, and she was unconscious for about 5 days without being able to swallow saliva. But we did know that she was going to pass away. And she was a very, very spiritual person throughout her life. And most of the elderly monks, they actually called her and spoke to. I remember our own monk from Lankarama, he was in Sri Lanka, he called and he passed blessings and told Amma to think about the Buddha and make it like a mantra to keep repeating towards the end, like when everything else is not clear. That was one advice. And then Bante Mahinda from Aloka, he told Mum as well. He said, look, you will face the biggest test of your life towards the end. And he said, just as you've been patient all this life and practicing and having the spiritual path, this will help you in that final test. So have faith that it will be okay and be patient.
Yeah.
And yeah, after that, he advised us, the family, when mum is lucid, for us to talk to her and take forgiveness from her for any of our mistakes, and also to forgive her for anything that's happened from her part that has hurt us, and also rejoice with all the good things she has done, and also very clearly to give her permission and say that you will continue all the good work that she's done and continue to have a good life. And we asked Amma before she became unconscious, and she clearly said she was content with her life, that she's had no regrets, that she was happy. And at the time of passing away, when she was unconscious, she slowly passed away. Her breaths were very slow and gentle. And we were advised by the senior monks who were around us not to disturb. So we chanted the Itipiso Gatha. After she passed away for about 10 or 15 minutes, none of us cried. We were around her bed and we were very peaceful and quiet, and the death was a very spiritual experience. Similarly, my dad passed away only 7 or 8 months ago. You know about this. He had a sudden massive stroke and he was unconscious. He was in the hospital. We decided there was no point trying to resuscitate him. So he was unconscious for about 24 hours. I stayed overnight with him. Once again, towards the end, we could see that the breathing was becoming labored and the time was running out. So I quietly spoke to him because I was the closest by that stage. Amma wasn't around. Once again, I did the same thing, reminded him what a good life he's had, that he's fulfilled all his lay duties, worldly duties and responsibilities, that we would be okay with him leaving, that I would look after my other sisters and we would be fine together. And exactly did all of those things what we did with Amma. And all three of us chanted, this is the three daughters, chanted Pirit. And at the end of the Tunsutta, he was unconscious. He couldn't move his hands or anything beforehand. Both his hands came into a prayer position. And that was unbelievable. So, and like with Amma, we were very quiet and peaceful and continued that peaceful chanting process for another 10 minutes. So Tata was in hospital, but we didn't call the nurses, we didn't call anyone, but kept very quiet and peaceful apart from the chanting. So none of us cried at the time. So I thought I'd share that experience because the other person asked about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the important thing is it all depends. When you have had parents who are Buddhist, very well practicing people, it's one
Yeah.
way. So it all depends. And so we have to be sensitive. There are many things that can be done. But so this is one way. And like I mentioned, all those things. But we have to know the time and place. So we have to be sensitive to the person and their past, their practice, and all of those things. So not to repeat what somebody else did and worked, but because each situation is different, but each timing also different. And even if it is a Buddhist well-practiced person, still we don't know what they want. Sometimes all they want is to meditate, and what we may be doing may be a disturbance. Even our chanting may be a disturbance. So it's really hard to know. But like I said, if you become very quiet, very still, and do that deep listening practice, you may sort of intuitively feel what may be the appropriate thing to do. So it is hard to know, but there are many things you can do. All of those things are great. Thanks for sharing. And done at the right time and right place. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.